You guys ready?
Yeah, it's recording.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, so I know I talked about this originally, but this theme just seemed to be like strung throughout the book, and as we dove deeper, it just developed more. How do you think the id shaped Amir's life? So, like, just a refresher, according to Sigmund Freud, the id is the personality component that works to satisfy basic urge, needs, and desires. And I think it shaped his way in his need for Baba's attention, how to squash his guilt, or for the redemption he needed. So, what things did he do that showed the id? Do you guys think?
Well, I think obviously the rape scene where he was watching Hassan like literally get raped, and I think it was the thing that was stopping him from actually going in and helping him, like more than just his fear, like his need to like get Baba's approval.
Yeah.
And he like had stepped in and like stopped it or whatever. Obviously, we know that Baba would have been more proud of him, but in his like little kid brain, he was like, no, the kite is more important.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was like his id.
Yeah, because his like one of his like most basic like wants was just Baba's approval. So he like just stood there and was like, "But I want the kite. Like to win Baba's approval, I need the kite," and that was his whole kind of plan.
Well, and
And
another.
then,
Yeah.
oh, sorry.
You go.
Oh no, I was just gonna say that after that he like I feel like so ashamed that he ends up wanting him out. He's like, oh, like I think we need to he needs to leave, and then the father's like, shame on you, and so he pretends that he stole the watch just to get him out, because I feel like he did that because he felt so guilty he couldn't deal with the guilt and the shame like he felt.
Exactly. The specific quote that like aligned with that was on like page 105, and he says that hiding his money with Hassan will get Hassan in trouble, but he does it anyway for his own good. The quote specifically is, Amir is saying, "I was a liar, a cheat, and a thief, and I would have told, except for that part of me was glad this would all be over soon." So that was his like basic want, or like his basic need, was that he wanted Hassan out because it made him feel guilty, and he didn't want to feel that guilt, so he instead blamed him for stealing money when he didn't do that at all, and it was in fact Amir who was a liar, a cheat, and a thief.
I think we like see his it also towards the end of the book when he basically tries to adopt Hassan's like son. And that was probably like his time to like be redeemed to himself.
Yeah, I think that's a very big portion of the book is just his id in that one. Because as you grow up, your id becomes a smaller part of you, and your ego and super ego, which are other parts of your personality, become larger. And with Amir, it doesn't seem to happen that way. It seems like the guilt has racked him his entire life so much that his it is just the strongest thing he can think of. It's just completely what influences him. And obviously he is doing good for Sarab when he takes him home, but he is doing that for his own good, his own want to and like desire to finally not feel that guilt and redeem himself.
Yeah, I agree, because like even then, like when he went back for I think Baba's friend Rahim his name, like when he goes back to him because he finds out he's like sick and dying, like he was like, you need to like go find his son and like save him, and like even like at the beginning he was like, no, I can't do it, like I don't want to do it, like it's too dangerous, and then he had to like convince him that like he needed to do it, because then he like tells him that like Hassan is dead and that like he like needs to like find his son. And I think that like just shows like more on like his personality and like how he thinks, because like imagine if Hassan like wasn't dead, like would he still go find his son if that wasn't the case, you know?
Oh, completely. I think I don't remember the exact quote, but I remember Amir said something like, this is like my one chance. Like everything else, like Hassan is dead. I don't have another chance to apologize, to redeem himself of that guilt. And so this was his last chance, and that's, I think, what made him decide that he needs to go find Sorab.
I agree. I think definitely in the beginning that was like the main thing driving him to find the kid, but like I think after he found him, like taking care of him, more of like a he became more of like a father figure or like an uncle. I don't know what one you want to do, but like he felt more connected to the kid, and then like instead of just doing it to redeem himself, he actually ended up caring about the kid and wanting the best for him.
Yeah, he got like a great connection with him, and that's kind of more of his like super ego, which is like his morale, like moral compass, and his ego is just like the socializing part. And so he formed that connection through his ego and his super ego, and that just stayed with them, and that made them connected at the beginning because he cared for him. It wasn't just a way to redeem his guilt. He realized he was a real person and he cared for him. But then I think towards the end it became like he betrayed his trust, and not like he did it in a way that was selfish. He was trying to do the best for both of them, but I think he was thinking the quickest, easiest way versus the way that would treat them both the best. And so I think that was more of his id talking as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jordan.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I agree with everything you said. And I found the quote where it was like, I had one last chance, like one final like opportunity to decide who I was gonna be. And like I just feel like Amir made his decisions based off of what benefited him, not what benefited Hassan. And Hassan was the exact opposite. Like he did everything for Amir, and Amir only did everything for himself.
Yeah, I know a specific like instance of that in the book of just when they were children is when they would slingshot rocks or like throw rocks at people or like the windows and stuff. And Baba would come up and be like, "What are you doing?" And Amir would be like, "It was Hassan, not me." And Hassan would be like, "Yeah, that was me," even though it wasn't. And it was completely Amir's idea. It just shows like how selfless Hassan was and like the difference between them, what kind of what part of their personalities governed them. And so more like the super ego was Hassan being the like righteous, like I will do anything for you, just trying to help, just trying to be a great person, where Amir was super selfish and just acted like a little kid who wanted what he wanted and fought for his own desires.
Right.
Okay, just talking about his basic needs and desires, what do you guys think his basic desires and needs were? Like what influenced him to do those things to redeem himself or to get rid of his guilt?
Definitely like he really wanted just the approval from his dad, and to like I think he really just like wanted his dad to like love him, and like obviously like his dad did love him like in his own way, but like he just wanted like all that attention. And like he was like, why is my dad um like why does he treat me the same as his son? Like I'm his son, and like they're like the family slaves, you know? Like that's kind of, I feel like that's kind of like in the back of his head. That's why he always like was like super jealous, and like he really just wanted like his dad to like approve of him and like not be disappointed in him and think he's like a strong man. And so like I think that's why like mainly where it came from, he like just wanted like his dad's approval basically.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a psychological theory which is Erickson's theory, and specifically from preschool age to school age. So after his mother died and his dad just wasn't there as much, giving him as much comfort or love when his dad was supposed to be, children are learning to develop their independence with parental encouragement and support. So if they find that their parents aren't giving them that, so his mom was dead, his dad didn't care for him as a father should, he didn't give him as much support as he needed, then they feel guilty. he found himself unable to meet what his father wanted of him. So being super athletic, being this like great big boy, not somebody who loved reading and poetry like he did, but he couldn't meet those expectations, and he developed a sense of guilt about himself. This cast a shadow over his life the entire time because it made him do things that he regret, like just wanting Baba's approval, so he let other people get hurt, or he would intentionally hurt other people and just be like, blame things on other people just because he was guilty and felt guilty about himself. And specifically with Hassan, getting his father back, he felt needed sacrifice, so he chose Hassan to be the sacrifice because he thought Hassan got attention that he deserved. And this shows because he was like, I'll let Hassan be the sacrifice as long as I get that blue kite and can take it back to my father.
I agree. And I think like as Amir like grows up and goes to America with his father, the relationship gets a lot better, and then you can kind of see like his selflessness like go away almost, because it's like, oh yeah, like I'm actually like able to like have a bond with my father, make him proud. And like I have like the feminist lens, so like when he was like looking for like a wife, or like liked his wife or whatever, and she wasn't like pure, I think if it was like back when Amir was still seeking the approval of his father, mainly, he wouldn't have been with her because she wasn't pure enough. But he didn't care anymore because he already got what he was looking for, which was a bond with his father.
Yeah, I remember at the end of the book, Amir talks about how in Afghanistan there was like a complete break in like who like Amir and Baba were, so they were so separate. But when they go to America, he talks about like living in an apartment, like having cheap like clothes, cheap cars, and stuff like that, and how that bonded them because they were both struggling in America. And so I think that, like you're saying, kind of leads to him being like, okay, Bob and I are working together. Like, I don't need his approval. We're the same. And so that's where he feels comfortable enough to marry Soraya, because she is unpure,
Yeah.
People say.
Especially when he had to like take care of Bala towards the end because of his cancer. Like I feel like it really just kind of like fulfilled something that was missing in him, like that bond.
Yeah, and I also think like in Afghanistan, Baba was like this amazing, like powerful man. Like everyone knew him, everyone loved him. And then when they came to America, like he had a hard time like speaking English and like talking to people and understanding. And then Amir became more like adapted to like the American lifestyle, and he kind of like took control and like had that power because like he could like take care of his dad, and like he could like be the one that was talking to the people and like understanding them. Like I remember there was this one part where like they were in the grocery store, and like the like couple who like owned the store were like, your dad's like going crazy, like we don't understand him, and like all this stuff. And like I think that kind of like gave Amir that reassurance that like he's like not like better than his dad, but like they're like one, you know, because like he can like take care of him, and like he's the one that's powerful now, basically.
Yeah. Like big thing that Amir, like one of Amir's motives was like love and self-esteem and belongingness, because he just wanted to feel like somebody wanted him, basically. And when they moved to America, he gets Baba's like love one-on-one, and so that just like gives him like a better sense of who he is, and this like builds him up, and I feel like makes him a better person, where he's not as concerned with his like id, as we talked about in the previous question, but more concerned with like the ego and super ego. So he is like acting more on his like morality, like making sure everybody's like thinking more about others than himself. And this like builds his sense of belonging in the community, because like you were talking about at the grocery store, he felt like he belonged because he could understand better than his dad could. And not like he feels he's better than his dad, but he's like, oh, okay, like I'm doing a little better in America than like he is, and that builds his self-esteem as well. So I feel like as the book progresses, it definitely like builds his character and his personality.
Yeah, I agree. I think like in America is when he really sees like that his dad also has flaws. Like he isn't this like superhero that he built up in his head when he was a kid back in Afghanistan. Like dad struggles just like he does. And that's kind of what brought down the wall, I think.
Yeah. Okay, I'm done with all my questions if any of you guys want to.
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, go for it.
So,
Sure.
I think it was Esther, you were talking about the store, and that's actually one of my questions. I was asking, what are some major differences between the economy in the US versus Afghanistan, especially when it comes to paying for things? And so on page 128, he gets really, really offended and like throws a fit, and he's like, does he think I'm a thief? Like Baba said, his voice rising, people are gathered outside, because it's like he takes offense to it, thinking that these people are asking for his ID because it's like a distrust type thing. And Amir has to step in and kind of like smooth things over so the police don't come. And like Baba just feels really disconnected from everything he knows, because like in Kabul, I think that's how you pronounce it, Kabul, he was very like high end, like up there and rich, and then he comes here and he's like, he has a low wage job working at a gas station. And so that's one of my questions. And I'm also looking at like the Marxist view, or yeah, I think it's Marxist view. And there's another one. Hang on. Oh, I was also looking at, so Marxist is the difference between classes. Let me pull it up. Yeah, so Marxism is the interaction between like social classes. And so we're obviously looking at Hazaras versus, what is the other race, or what is Amir again?
I don't exactly remember, but I know exactly what you're talking about. The Sunni Muslims, I believe.
Yeah. So pretty much we're just looking at that, and like it says here, lucky Hazara, having such a concerned master, his father should get on his knees, sweep the dust at your feet with his eyelashes. And we see like how Hazaras are just looked at with such disgust, and it's kind of like obviously not okay, but why is it like that, and why are Hazaras looked at so lowly when the others are? It's gonna bother me. What is their other? What's the other one? Hazaras and is it like Hashims?
I think it's it started with a P. It was like Paxton.
Pashtun.
Oh yeah, Passion. Yeah, that I
Yeah.
remember that.
So why are they looked at?
But
so
I think the main reason, I remember like just talking about like Marxist and like the classism kind of thing, was that the Mongols, I believe, invaded Afghanistan, and they ended up having kids with some of them, and that was the what was Hassan again? What were they? The Hazaras. The Hazaras were more like, they had more Asian traits and like features, and that's how they could tell, the like Pashtuns could tell who they were. And since they had been invaded by the Mongols, they had like just a deep distrust and hate for them, which led them to like think of even the people that were descendants of it, even if they weren't the actual people, they were still from Afghanistan and they were still part of their country, they viewed them as like wrong and bad. And they also had like different forms of like the Muslim religion, like the Shia and Sunni. So those made the Pashtuns think they were better than the rest of them. And then for the grocery store, I know that in Afghanistan, just since Baba was revered so highly, that everybody trusted him. And I think that like they could literally like go into stores, and if they forgot money, like people knew who people were, and they were just like, okay, we trust you, like come back, kind of thing. And America's a completely different thing. Like they don't know these people, like why are they here, kind of thing, like what are they doing. And so that kind of made Baba feel probably like the lower class, more like a Hazara than a Pashtun like he was in Afghanistan.
Right.
There's a quote, and it's like in the same page where he's like kicked out of the supermarket, and I don't have the quote in front of me, but I remember it was like back in Afghanistan, he could bring like a stick and they would just do like notches in it to know how much he owed. Mm-hmm. And they just trusted each other a lot more. And so I think there's like a whole difference in like kind of how they pay each other too. Again, like with the notches, like I'm not sure if it's because he was so like rich and famous, or not famous, but like rich and well known, as you were saying, that he was allowed to just like do that. But it's definitely different. Like you couldn't just bring like have like a tab. Kind of was like their tab. It was like a stick. So it kind of shows the difference too.
Yeah.
And then
oh, you go.
Remember they kept saying like how almost disorganized Afghanistan was, or just like more like crazy than the US, especially when it came to like trading and like buying stuff, and it was all just like kind of freer and less like rules and regulations than in the US. So I think that was a big difference for Baba to like learn and adjust to.
Yeah, definitely. And I know what you're talking about with the baker. Like in Kabul, he would send like Amir and Hassan to the baker with a stick, and then at the end of the month, they would just turn it in. And so when they ask for his ID, it's like a sign of distrust, and he like takes big offense to it because he's just not used to that. And then going back, one of my other questions is, what role did Hassan and Amir, their economic backgrounds play? And so looking back at the difference between Pashtuns and Hazaras, we can see like the character of Mir was like very fortunate, and his father had a good reputation. And Hassan obviously didn't. Like he was very poor, but he still was a good person and he was kind. And so like Hassan would always lie for him, and he always believed it was his duty to like protect Amir, versus Amir just betrays Hassan and doesn't think twice about it.
Yeah, I think like I think economics play a big part into who people are and like how their life goes, because obviously like you're talking like Hassan was a lot more generous, nicer, like he protected Amir, but yet he just didn't have the money. So he couldn't escape the country, especially like when everything went into turmoil and like Kabul got taken over. So he wasn't fortunate enough to leave the country, even though he was a great person. He just got stuck there and eventually died there. Whereas Amir, even though he was he just made a lot of mistakes, and maybe he wasn't a bad person, but he acted like a little kid and like let bad things happen to others, that he got out just because of his money circumstance, which just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I also think that Amir was, since he was like really rich, he and like until he came to America, he never really like understood what it was like to like live day by day and like not having like worry that you're not gonna have enough food for the next day, and like things that like a lot of people worry about. And I remember like chapter 19 when he like goes back to Afghanistan, I think his name is Farid, is like, he was like, you were never really in Afghanistan. Like, you were a tourist because you were rich. And he was like, this is what it's like to live here and like be poor, basically. Like, people are like living on, like, there's like a guy that was like homeless and like living in rags, and he was like, this is what it's like he was like, you never experienced that because he's like, you're not really in Afghanistan because you were rich, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have that quote right here. It's, I feel like a tourist in my own country. I said, taking in a I don't even gothered. I totally botched that word. Leading a half dozen emaciated goats along the side of the road. Farid snickered, tossed a cigarette. You still think of this place as your country. And that's where it goes into my last question, which is, do you guys think the Taliban made, or how do you guys think the Taliban made Afghanistan poorer? And Amir realizes the true like Afghan people were the ones who stayed because they obviously didn't have enough money to leave, and so they had to go through all that war and the Taliban taking over. And those were the true people who stayed to protect their country, unlike him, who was able to flee to America in times of need.
So, I think the Taliban, again, because I was looking through the feminist view, it's like they didn't allow women to work. And so once they would kill like the husbands for whatever reason there was to kill the husband, they would just leave the women and children with no job at all and no way to like support themselves. And so I think that really affected like their like economy and how poor everyone was. And I also think, like, I'm not sure, but I feel like they kind of, like, determine, like, who was really working. And I know there was one scene where um, Amir was back and he, like, saw this guy on the side of the road, like, selling his prosthetic leg. And it, like, really shows, like, just how poor they were and how, like, how different it was than what he remembers.
Right. Yeah, definitely, because the Taliban used fear and violence to like control the people, and then other countries saw like how chaotic it was and they didn't want to trade with them. And so it really just affected their economy because they weren't able to, like, it wasn't like it used to be. And when Amir comes back, he sees that and realizes he's not this rich, high-end person in this country anymore, and like it's very different.
Yeah. A way, like, just thinking through like the psychological lens, was a way that governments control people and make them feel powerless and like they can't riot against the leading government is through keeping them hungry and poor. And so they didn't have any money to do anything or get food. So they were weak and they just didn't have that ability to go up against the Taliban, which is what the Taliban wanted. And so I think that's one of the reasons the Taliban may have wanted to keep the country so poor and so frightened all the time, is because if they feel like poor and they can't eat and they're like just don't have anything they can buy, then they feel like they can't do anything and just feel super like weak.
Right. Yeah, I definitely agree, because it was definitely a control thing. Like, they wanted to control the women, they wanted to control all the people, and that was their best way of doing it, by creating fear and like making them starving, begging for food, begging for money. So yeah. And I think that's it for all of my questions. You guys have any like more thoughts, or if somebody wants to go on with their lens?
I could go. So mine was the feminist lens, and obviously in their like culture and their beliefs, like the men had the power. The men were like worth more than the women. The women were really there to like have children and be married and to be pure, and just like there for their husbands. And there's a quote between Amir and his wife after they go to a wedding. And she says, she's talking about how she had a boyfriend before Amir married her. And so no one really wanted her because she was like tainted and unpure. And so she like hears people gossiping about her and like, oh, how lucky that the person getting married wasn't marrying her. And so she kind of goes on like a rant to Amir in the car on the ride home. And she says their sons go out to the nightclubs looking for meat and get their girlfriends pregnant. They have kids out of wedlock and no one says a goddamn thing. Oh, they're just men having fun. I make one mistake and suddenly everyone is nagging and moons, and I have my face rubbed in it for the rest of my life. So there's obviously a big difference between how they view men and women and what women are allowed to do and stuff. And there's another quote later on that kind of solidifies like how like worthless kind of women are to men. And it's a joke between Amir and I forget his name. It's like it starts with an F. The guy that was like showing him.
I think.
What was it?
I think like Fahib or something, was it?
Yeah, that one. Him.
Or Fareed. My bad. I just found his name. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they're making like a joke between each other, and I'm gonna do bad pronouncing these names, but it goes, Aga, did you hear what Milan Nasser did when his daughter came home and complained that her husband had beaten her? And then they laugh a little bit, and Amir goes, what? And he goes, he beat her too. He sent her back to tell the husband that Mallah was no fool. If the bastard was going to beat his daughter, then Mallah would beat his wife in return. And so it just kind of shows like how worthless women were. Yeah. And so I was wondering, like, do you think because women were viewed this way that it like, how do you think it affected how men like were behaving?
I definitely think they're
everyone.
Oh, sorry. Did somebody say something? Oh, there was like an echo. Sorry. But there's definitely like a double standard. And I think Soraya realizes that when she made a mistake. And I feel like she's definitely more a typical like American woman than an Afghan woman. And she just sees how unfair it is that men can go out and have like sex with whoever they want versus when women have sex outside of marriage, they're shamed for the rest of their lives. And men just have a lot more freedom than women do, and they're allowed to make their own choices versus women are seen almost as like a property and just kind of like not an actual person. Like they're just seen as you cook, you clean, you have the kids, you take care of them, and we can do whatever we want.
No, I completely agree. It shows like throughout other people as well. Like obviously this is talking about Hassan's mother, Samnubar. And I know she was, compared to Soraya, she was very promiscuous. She had sex with a lot of people, where Soraya had like a boyfriend. But in on page 7, I believe it was chapter 1, they are walking through like a military yard, the military barracks, and one of the like military men is like, hey Hassan, like I know you. And they were like how? And he was like, oh, I knew your mother. Did you know that? I knew her real good, and I took her from behind by that creek over there. And the soldiers laugh. And so that kind of shows that even though this man is having sex with another woman, he is found as funny by his fellow like soldiers. They're like, oh my gosh, that's so funny, like what a funny thing you did, where she is shamed and everybody belittles her and thinks she is just dirt. because she has sex with other people, but they're like, what about the men that she had sex with? Like, obviously they weren't in wedlock either, so why is there like that double standard that exists? But it's just so obvious that it's a bigger double standard there, like in Afghanistan, than there is in the US.
Yeah.
I agree. There's even this one part when they're like fleeing to the US and they get pulled over, and one of the guards like it's like, okay, like I'll let you go, but like let me rape your wife. There's like a woman on the bus that they were like, he was like, okay, I'll let you go, but let me rape her. And like no one said anything, not her husband, no one. They were just like, okay, like if that's the price that we have to pay, then like go ahead. Like they couldn't stand up to him. Like they're like, okay, like I guess she's gonna go get raped, like whatever. And it like no one said anything except for Baba. And I think Baba was different than a lot of people, especially when it came to like how they viewed women. Even just like I know like keeping the fact that Hassan was like his son and that he slept with his mother instead of the other one was like for his own pride, but I think in some way it was him like trying to protect her too.
Yeah.
And then if no one else has anything else to add to that, I had another question, and it has to do with like obviously women are viewed to just have children for their husbands, mainly sons. And it turned out that Amir's wife was barren. She couldn't have any children at all. And obviously, like in day-to-day life, like even here now, it's like really sad when you can't have your own children. But I can't help but think like because she was expected to give Amir a son, like do you guys think it was much worse for her not being able to have children than it would be for other people?
Yeah, I definitely think it was way worse, especially because she had all that pressure from like her dad and her mom, and they were like, "Oh, we want you to like continue on," and like he was her like dad, like the director would like talk, the general I meant would talk about like how like all these like generations of like his like family and like there needs to be like another name and like all this stuff. And I think especially like with her background, like it was kind of like the cherry on top of the cake that like she was like, wow, like my whole life, like I've been put down, I've been gossiped about, like everyone has like talked bad about me because of this one mistake I made, and now like I can't have kids. And like I think for her it was just like really bad and like really like affected like her like mental health and everything. And like even like I think she wanted to like consider adopting, and then like I think Amar and the general, they're like oh, like if you adopt then it's like it's not the same bloodline, like it'll be different, you know, like. And I think it was just hard for her because I think like secretly like she always wanted to have kids, and like that was like the one thing that she couldn't have. And it was like that would just like honestly suck, like if that was me, like I couldn't have kids, you know.
Yeah, totally. And I think her like just being a woman that couldn't have kids too is ultra hard because like as we've talked about in like Afghan society, even if like they moved countries, they still have that culture around them. That's what women are viewed to be useful for almost, which is obviously just not how a lot of people in America think anymore. But I think with that like culture, it does make them think that she needs to be giving them children. And I think that's completely different to like if a man was barren, because I know Hassan's dad Ali, I believe, was they couldn't have children, and that is why Hassan was born. And like that's why Hassan is Hassan is Baba's child. And so I think, but because people knew that Ali couldn't have children and yet he still ended up having a child, I think it's weird because they weren't like, oh, Ali can't have a child, like, oh my gosh, like they didn't shame him or anything. And especially when he took care of a child that wasn't his own, I just think it's super unfortunate that there's just that big disregard, or like the big difference between male and female, and like what they're viewed to be useful for, and like why they get shamed for certain things.
I completely agree. That was pretty much all I have to say. So
Okay, I'll do mine really quick because I know we're like second period's about to start. Okay, so I have the historical lens, and my first question is basically what the the time and place, like, and how it really like um affected Hassan and Amar. And I know we kind of talked about that, but like obviously it was like took place in Afghanistan, and it was like around the 1960s. And like, do you guys think if it was like a different time and like a different place, then like the outcome of what happened like would be different? Because I knew they had like a lot of like historical, like they like knew a lot of stuff, especially like I remember in the beginning of the book, I think his name is like Asif. He was talking about like World War II and like Hitler, and so like they like had that information, you know, and they were like aware of what was happening in like the other parts of the world. And so like especially that like Afghanistan has had like so many like problems with like um the Taliban and like the war and everything. And like I have this quote, it was like chapter 16. Amir says, "The war is over, Hassan. There's going to be peace, and solemn and happiness and calm. No more rockets, no more killing, no more funerals." Um, and then it kind of explains that like Hassan like knew that like was not the case, and like he was like it may end well for you, but it's not going to end well for me. And he was like exactly right about that, because afterwards like they started terrorizing and like especially targeting the Hazars. So like, do you guys think if it was like a different country, or like even like 20 years earlier, like it would be like different, or not really?
I think like it will, like 100% it would have been different. Like the main reason Hassan got killed was because of his race, and because the Taliban is like racist. And like yeah, like during the whole time, that's when like I'm not sure like where else it was happening, but I know there were like a period of time where there was like a lot of genocides, I think the word is, where they were just like killing off races that they didn't think was like pure or like the right one in their country.
I think they talked about.
So like if it was a different place or different time, then I think yeah, that's the cleansing. And so like if it was a different place and time, like I feel like he would be alive, and the whole story would be different. Like the son would have like a father and a family, and like Amir might have not even come back to Afghanistan at all. So
yeah, I agree, because like I think that Hassan would have been raped either way, because it still would have been like Amir wanted his father's approval, and I think Asef would have been a sociopath no matter if Hitler was alive or not. So I think that kind of portion of the story wouldn't have changed, just because of like the psychological, like he's a sociopath and the wanting for his father's approval. But I do think that Amir would have found like a resolution, like would have redeemed himself by coming back and apologizing, or not even leaving in the first place, and eventually making it up to him, versus having to make it up to him through bringing his child home and living with that guilt because he didn't get to say anything to Hassan before he passed. So I think that would have been a big change in how Amir felt, because he probably wouldn't have even left the US, and he would have stayed in his home country and gotten to live out his days and mature, and then finally realize what he did wrong and end up like apologizing or figuring out his life in that way in Afghanistan.
Yeah. Well, and Esther, how you were saying, would this have happened if this was earlier in like time or later or whatever? that, like, the reason Amir and Baba fled to America is because it was safe there. Like, that doesn't happen in America. Like, women aren't treated the way they are treated in these other countries, and it's still happening today. And so in like Afghanistan and like all of the women over there are just treated horribly. And so I definitely think it was the time and place. And I still think, like you said, Asef was definitely a sociopath, and that wasn't going to change anything. But I don't think if this was like, this wouldn't have happened in America to like the women and kind of the like taking over.
I think obviously Yosef was a sociopath, but he kind of took and saw what Hitler did as like inspiration for like what he could do.
Yeah.
So obviously I think he would have done something bad no matter what, but I think what did happen is because of Hitler and like how he viewed him as like this hero.
Yeah, and how like the Taliban definitely like influenced Asef and how he ends up being like the person in the arena at the end of the book and the one who is killing all the Hazaras and like kind of enslaves Sorab is because of Hitler. I don't think he would have ended up like that. I don't think there would have been that much like beyond him being a sociopath and just either ending up doing something awful to just people, but like instead of having a government or like a Taliban backing, which was kind of their government at the time, instead of having a government backing in like an easy way or like ability to do that, he would have had to do it through more work and probably would have gone to prison or something like that if he had ended up hurting people the way he intended throughout his entire life.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I definitely think that he like really like saw what Hitler did, and like he like specifically was like, he was like, yeah, I think we need to have genocide for all the Hazars just like Hitler did. Like, and he even like had his book, and like I think that really like shows and like reflects how much history has on other countries, because they like use what happened there and like turn it into their own methods. And you can like we like see throughout history how like other countries take other things that they do and like make it their own, or like increase it or decrease it. And I think that's like really important that we need to consider. And also for my second question, I want to talk about like the author, and I think he has like a huge part in this because his story is really similar to Amar's. The author, I'm totally gonna butcher his name, but it's like Khalid Hazuni, and he was born in Kabul, Afghanistan, in 1965, and he like lived there like with his dad. And then afterwards, like when he was older, it said that he like moved to California. And I think that like really reflects like his life, his like basically what it shows in the book, obviously, and like that's how he got all his ideas and everything. And like it says that the Kite Runner is a fictional story, but do you guys think that this is like also kind of a rhetorical question, do you guys think that like the author's life and Amir's life are more similar than we know? And like, do you think that like that like it really like reflects how much like thought and like effort that the author put into this book, because it was like literally his life, like he lived like the exact same way, and like there's like so many similarities between the author and like Amir's life?
Yeah, I think he definitely put more effort into it because he probably felt like this was his life, and a lot of like the details and stuff were probably completely based off of his life. I don't know if like the people were or his story. Maybe it was based off of him and he wanted to relieve the guilt that he felt. So part of that was part of his story, or maybe he knew somebody who was a part of his story, or he just made it up. But I think these details are something that like only he has experienced because he has lived through it, and this was his life. And so that's why he feels how he feels and just ends up writing the book is just because this was like where he lived. He lived a very similar life to this and just ended up in the same place. So I think he is trying to show his life through the story, but also create another fictional life through the story.
Yeah, I think like the story seems so realistic. Like I didn't know it was fiction until like toward the end, and I think it's so realistic because he's pulling so many details from his childhood, and I think Amir is supposed to be like basically like kind of him through the story. Like he even goes in later in life and like starts writing books.
Yeah,
And stuff just like him. So I think definitely him pulling from his own experience was a big part of the book.
Yeah, I definitely think the author like I think if it was like anyone else that tried to like explain and bring awareness to what was happening in Afghanistan, like they couldn't have done it as well as the author did because he literally like lived it. And if it was someone else that like just did research on it and tried to like write a book about it, like it would not be the same, and you would not really like feel the connection that like this really happened, and like especially with like the war and the genocide and like the terrorizing and everything like that actually happened. And it was like literally like a first-hand view. And I think if it was like anyone else, like we wouldn't like understand it as much and really like see his point of view because he was there and he lived it and like that was his life.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And that's basically like all I have to say. I know we're like really running out of time. But if anything else has any thoughts, that's kind of like the wrap up to my lens.
I think we're all good. Are we all good, guys?
Good.
Okay,
Good job,
awesome.
everyone. Okay, do I
Alright.
press stop?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, bye guys.